Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf tes in גיטין, as we learned for a four shlema for Elazar ben Reuma and Yosef Tzriya ben Chaim Michal. Says the Mishnah. Maybe get in Dina Siyam. The Mishnah smack in the middle of Testament Al. Maybe get in Dina Siyam. We learned before that if you bring a get from overseas or from Israel to overseas, so either overseas to Israel or Israel to overseas, the shliach has to say b'fanei nechem is exer drabanan, so that if the husband contests the get, we can say no, we've checked it out either because of lishma or because of edom suyim l'kaimo, and it's been confirmed, and therefore his protest will not be accepted. Okay, let's say though he can't say b'fanei nechem. We'll see why. He became a deaf mute and he can't say anything. So if there's edom. If there's Adam on the get, so be Makayim, confirm it with the Chasimus, even though he didn't say b'fanei nechta, because he wasn't able to. If there's Adam on the star, right, there's Adam signed on it, so be Makayim and confirm that those are kosher Adam. Here for the first time we're comparing גיטין נשים ושחרורי עבדים. That's the first time we mentioned it yesterday also, that שחרורי עבדים and גיטין נשים are similar. In each case, a man is releasing his wife from the marriage or the eved from servitude. And in both cases, it says law. The cost of law, it says by get. And by shechur avodim, it says chufsha lo nitan law. So we learn out both of them. Law always means lishma. So here they both have a similar of lishma, but also they're similar, maybe, that if a person means a get shechur for an eved from one place to another, from overseas to Israel or vice versa, he also to say b'fanei nechta, and this is one of the ways this is one of the similarities of גיטין נשים ושחרורי. Now, in both cases it says law, and law means the shema. But as we saw yesterday, that the fact that it says law in both cases tells us there's a gzeira shava between the two, and therefore we learn out one from the other. Right? We said that we learn out one thing from the other, just like by get isha, we saw yesterday at the top, further up on this page, it says because of law sefer krisus v'nasu biyada, it's got to be totally cut off. Right? That's what we explained yesterday, that it's got to be totally cut. If it's in the cases we said, if a person just says, I'm giving all my nechasim except for something, it's not clear that he really cut him off, that he cut off the eved and gave him his freedom. So it's not clear. It's got to be clear, because by get isha says sefer krisus, a get of cutting off, separation, got to be clear. And the same thing, since it says law by both, we compare shechur vadim to get isha. There it's also got to be clear. It's got to be 100% clear. So there was one similarity that we said. We said that yesterday, right? That they both have to be krisus. The Gemara doesn't talk about them as similarities, but they're really the same. It's not a get shechur. It's not a freedom if it's not 100% clear. And here he tells us that גיטין נשים ושחרורי are both the same molech hamovi, whether you're taking from Israel to chutz la'aretz or chutz la'aretz Eretz Yisrael, they're both the same in that you have to say b'fanei nechta on both. Tosfos asks, mainly we say that what's the advantage of saying one person saying saying b'fanei nechta? So he said, because in case the husband contests it, we don't want her to be an iguna. So therefore, we've confirmed it. So it saves it, it protects her from the protest. So by a woman, you could understand you're saving her miguna, right, from being a chained woman. Her husband's not living with her anymore, and yet she can't get married if it's not a kosher get, if it's not been confirmed. So there we're saving her. But what iguna is there by an eved? Why do we have to say this? I can't by an eved also. Tosfos asks a few ones from bottom of the page. Mishum de Asur Vaschor, she's Asur Vaschor, and Ubishifka lo lesve hashliach le'eved get lo les we shouldn't pray hashliach le'eved gets there shame derasiam below Yasur Bishifka. In other words, if it's Asur Vaschor, if it's Shifka, Ubishifka lo lesve hashliach le'eved gets there, don't give it to him. Shame derasiam below Yasur Bishifka, you won't be Asur Bishifka. In other words, if you're saying because he can't marry a Vaschorin, and a shifra you can't, and you can't marry a shifra either. So don't give him the get at all. He'll still be able to marry a shifra. So the Gemara, so Tosfos answers, if you can't marry a regular Jewish woman, that's considered iguna. and also that he's not she'ein chayv mitzchayv b'mitzvahs. In other words, he'd rather be free so that he can marry a regular Jewish woman and be chayv mitzvahs. That's also an iguna. So we have over here this concept that just like by גיטין noshim, the rabbi said, the shliach to say b'fanei nechta, so as to protect her. Remember we said before, really, a stam get, you believe it's kosher. And most people are baki lishma. And the Rabbanan just said mishum iguna at the top of Gimel B'Alf. He said mishum iguna. We believe the shliach who says it's to her advantage, and the rabbis abuse. Gemara says it's a chumrah because if you have two, you need more. The answer is, since you have a two in front of two or three anyway, it's not an issue. Mikar made it, he's not going to make it for himself, and therefore it's really to save her from iguna. The rabbi said if one person comes and says that's to her advantage. So that's what we said before, and we're saying it's an advantage to the shliach also to be a free person. So because of iguna, both by noshim and by shechur avodim, the rabbi said make it a kana save b'fanei nechta, and that'll save problems. Okay, so we said in the Mishnah, the beginning of the Mishnah, if he brings a get from overseas and he can't say b'fanei nechta, so confirm it with the signatures, right? Affirm it with the signatures that it's okay. Ratify it with the signatures that either the Adam signed on it, ratify their own signatures, or other people recognize them, and that's good enough. But what do you mean he can't say b'fanei nechta? Why can't he say it? If he's a deaf mute, cheresh barasui gitin, a cheresh can't bring a get. By the time we learn our kol kshem a get, who's kosher to be a shliach for a gittin? Chutz micheresh at. These people are not considered to be bar das, a deaf mute, not like just a deaf person who today we know could be brilliant, but even a deaf mute could also be brilliant. But in Islam, cheresh a deaf mute, we assume we don't know, we can't ascertain his intelligence. A shot is an imbecile and a cotton is a child. So in these cases, they're not kosher to bring a get anyway. So what do you mean if he brings a get and he can't say b'fanei nechta? He was normal and he gave her the get, and before he got the words out to say b'fanei nechta, something happened to him. He got some disease or something happened to him and became a deaf mute right at that moment in time. So if he can't say it, be mekayim with these shars. But if he's not kosher melech, if he's a cheresh at the bekat melech, he's not kosher to bring a get anyway. He's not b'toras getting the kedushin. He's not a gadol. A child can't give a get either. Even if, let's say, how could a child be married? He can't marry a child. Well, let's say, for example, he was a yavam who was 10 years old, and his bia was considered a bia after the age of 9. It is a marriage to a raisa, but he can't give a get. So a child can't give a get, and therefore he can't be a shliach for a get. So he said, the same thing applies. He said, that you have to say, and this is one of the similarities the Mishnah said between גיטין noshim shechur avodim. As we said, there's a hekesh between them because it says law. Lishma, it says law means lishma. So by avodim, it's got that it has to be written lishma. That's from the word law itself. You don't need the Gzera Shava for that. Gzera Shava teaches me the other things like creases, etc. In 3 ways, גיטין noshim are similar to shechur avodim. In other words, in both cases, we're talking about freeing somebody via a document. You have to give them a get. So in 3 ways, how are they similar? How is that? Number 1, like the Mishnah said, shavel malcha maybe. You have to say b'fanei nechta if you're going from Israel to overseas or overseas to Israel. V'chol get sheish lo a kuti. Listen to this very carefully. A kuti, according to our Mishnah, according to this brisa, there's a question: what is a kuti? The Kuthians. Today we call them the Samaritans, right? Because they lived in Shomron. They came from a place called Kuta, and Melech Ashur brought them to Israel when he mixed up the world, right? And there's a question whether they are Geri Emes, they're truth regular Jews, or whether they're not really Geri Rice, they were forced and they're not really considered Jews. Our Mishnah holds that they were Jews, they were Geri Emes. However, there were certain things they didn't keep all the halachas that the Jews kept. We'll see. The laws that they kept carefully, but they weren't careful about all the things that the Jews keep. So therefore their testimony is always suspect. So he says, "Kol get sheish lo a kuti," any get. Now this get means any shtar. Remember we said before, get is not found in the Torah, but the word get means a shtar. Normally, get means a get isha, but it could also mean a get bill of sale or a shovar of some sort of receipt or any document. Or an IOU could also be a get. So he says any get that has an eight kuti on it, that has one of the eight is a kuti, is puzzle, is invalid. except for גיטין נשמה שכבדה. Now this sounds, what do you mean? If it's an IOU or a bill of sale, a kuti is puzzle if he signs on it. But a get or a shikra avodim, get them is a raisa, you're giving a get, that's okay. The Gemara will explain tomorrow's daf that we're speaking about. First of all, only one aid. One of the two aidim is a kuti, and he signed first on it, and a regular Jew is signed below him. And the rule is by גיטין that all the aidim have to sign together. You can't sign one without the other. If it's an IOU, and I say, listen, Jim, could you sign this for me? Here he's giving me the money. Jim, the one aid number one, Jim, and aid number two, John, don't have to be in the same room together. But in the case of a get, they have to be together. They have to see each other. And therefore, if the first aid is a guti and the second one below him is a Jew, you can rest assured that the Jew did not sign on it unless he knew that the kuti is a valid and that he's trustworthy. He's a bucky. That's when he's going to be a kol get sheish of a kuti. But we weren't making on that when it comes to money matters, because by money matters, maybe the Jew signed below and left room for somebody more chush than him above, and then a non-reliable kuti came in and he signed it, and therefore it's not good. So therefore, and that would be okay for IOUs, but a kuti is no good. If he's suspect, we can't trust him. So kol get sheish levet kuti is possible if it's a regular financial matter. Why? Because since both aidim signed together, not talking about if they're both kutis. According to Amelia, we'll see he holds even both kutis. But the Pashup Shad here in the Mishnah, the first shita is that no, if the first aid signed on it is a kuti, who we hold to be a ger emes, he's a real Jew, except they're suspect. But if the second guy signed below him is a regular Jew, we can rest assured that the regular Jew would not have signed unless he recognized and knew the first guy, the kuti, as being reliable. And therefore, it's okay. So here's another similarity can get the Rashim Shapiro Badim, that if the first aid signed on it is a kuti and the second one's a Jew, it's okay. It's a good start. It's a good get. Ishar get Eved Shapiro Badim, right? It's a valid get, and that's how get the Rashim is similar to Shapiro Badim as opposed to other staros. Okay, those are two similarities. What's the third one? When we don't live in Israel and you go by the Goyish courts, there's a rule of dina de malchus dina. You have to follow the rules of the law of the land, and therefore any shtar that's written, let's say Reuven lent Shimon $100, right? But they had Goyim signed on it, and it was in the Goyish court. It's okay. Even though the signature of the Goyim share in their kosher, except for Gitin Hashem Shechur Yavadim, you can't have a get or a get Isha signed by Goyim, right? Or enter the Goyish court. That for those certain they have to have Jewish courts. So if it's an IOU or a bill of sale or something of that sort, if it's a Goyish court, that's valid. You could have the judges can be Goyim, the Adam can be Goyim. That's okay. Obviously, we're talking about where a Jew is lending money to a Jew. Otherwise, what do we care? Let the Goyim do what they want. Except for get Nashim Shecharadim. Why? Because it says because of an asan, right? He writes the get. It's only somebody who's capable of writing a get. Whoever is capable of giving a get can write it. But if you can't, we're going to see later on, it says because of an asan by a get. If he's capable of giving a get, it means he's Jewish, then he can write it. If he's not capable of giving a get because he's not a Jewish person, Jewish people don't give gitin. How do they get divorced, by the way? Sends her away. And we declared that in Yavamas, the Gemara in Yavamas, some place talks there about about marriages and a goy or a mamzer, all that discussion over there, and always declared are the Catholics right according to goyish? By us we know how do you get divorced? You give her a get, right? Any Jew wants to divorce his wife, he gives her a get. Okay, you have to give it with her consent. He can give it to her. He doesn't like her, he has to give her a get. Can Goyim get divorced? Torah doesn't talk about getting for Goyim. So can Goyim get divorced? Maybe the Catholics who are the old style Catholics, everything's changed. But the Catholics used to say that you can't get divorced, right? Marriage is forever. So are they right by the Torah, according to the Torah? Torah Shiva Mitzvahs for Goyim also, right? So maybe they can't get divorced because they're not authorized to give a get. But Muslim Farshim say no, gives her a get the same way. How does he marry her? How does he marry her? He takes her into the house and says, "You're my wife." In the same way, they can get divorced that way too. So the Catholics are not correct. That's it. That's it. Okay, without a star. Without a star. They don't have a get. Yeah. Oh, killer. Yeah. Either way, it's not divorce. That's murder. Okay. So okay. So those are the three similarities between Gitin, Nashim, and Shechri Abadim. What are the three? And if one kuti, if the first 8 is a kuti, that's okay, right? Only by a Gitin, Nashim, Shechri Abadim. And the third thing is that you can't have a get isha or Shechri Abadim with Goyisha signatures on a Goyisha court. Ukediver Rav Meir holds there's a fourth similarity. Ba'arba. What is that? Homer 10 gets a lishti. Let's say a man says to a shliach, give this get to my wife or give this get shech to my ebed. And the shliach has not reached them yet. He's not there yet. He hasn't given it to them yet. He can go, the adon, the master, the husband can go back on it. Males, he can go back on either one of them. On either one of them, he can go back on it if it hasn't been given yet. Once he gives it to her, it's divorce. It's divorce. Give it to him in front of Adam, it's divorce. But he can go back on it. That's Rav Meir Shita. Why? So because the Meir holds that it's not, the shliach is not zocha, it is not mazaket for the woman or for the eved, because it's not a schus for the woman doesn't want to be divorced, and presumably the eved also doesn't want to be divorced from his husband because he gets food there, etc. He's happy where he is. That's Rav Meir Shita. The rabbis disagree. Rabbanan disagree. The Rabbanan say no. By an eved, it's a schus for him, right? He can't go back on it. Once the adon tells a shliach, give this get shikhr to my eved, he can't go back on it. Can't go back on it. Why? Because as soon as he gave it to the shliach was mazaked for him. And we'll see later on, there's machlokas among the Rishonim, mazaked for him right away, or mazaked for him only when he receives it. So Rashi sees mashma only when he receives it, but Rashi seems to go back on it later on. So here we have machlokas according to Rav Meir. Rav Meir holds that there's another similarity in get ish and shechavadim, that the master or the husband can go back on the deal if it hasn't yet reached the hand of the wife or the eved, respectively. Okay. Yes.
What happens if the woman does not accept
Bismanazeh, you can't force it on her. And at the time of the Gemara, she has no choice. If he gives it to her, she serves. She's divorced. That's it. If she gave it to her in her chutzner, in her house, it's also good. Not sure about the mailbox. Depends who owns the mailbox. Yeah.
It's not like Kedusha. Kedusha, if you give a Shaliach, go say, Isha,
yeah.
She's not the Kedusha until the Shaliach finishes his.
That's right. That's right.
Like
here too. Here too. No, here too. Here too. He can go back on it. She's not divorced until it gets into her hand. That's what Rav Meir is saying.
No, not Rav Meir. The
Rabbanan also agreed by get isha that it's not a schus for her. Everybody, even the Rabbanan agree. The Rabbanan and Rav Meir don't disagree. They don't disagree on a get isha. If a man gives a get to his wife and he sends it with a shliach, the shliach has not reached her yet. He hasn't given it to her yet, and the husband goes back on. He says, "I changed my mind. It's not a get. He's no longer the guy's not a shliach for anymore. It's not a get." Same thing with the kedusha. If he reneges on the deal before he gets it, so getting the kedusha the same when it comes to a woman. Right? He can go back on the deal according to everybody.
So we're only talking about
by shechur avid, because for an avid they say it's a schus. He'd rather be free. For a woman, we'd rather not be free. She'd rather stay married. But a sam avid would rather be free. That's what the Rabbanan say. Okay, so Rav Meir holds that there's a fourth similarity, right? That you can go back on the deal if he sends a get shechur or a get isha. So Bishlam Rabbanan and Yana Lamutei had Rav Meir. The rabbis say there's three because they don't hold the Rav Meir, because they hold that if you go back on a deal when you send a get to a woman and a get shechur to an eved, it's not the same. Get isha, you can go back on it because it's not schus for her. Shechur eved, you can't go back on it. Okay, so Bishlam Rav Meir. Why does Rav Meir say there's four? Four excludes what? What does he exclude? Listen to this. Adam that don't know how to sign. They're illiterate. They don't know how to sign. What they do is they scratch out signatures for them on the paper and they fill in the ink. They don't know how to sign. They're illiterate. They can't sign. When I bought my house, the guy signed an X. He didn't know how to sign. The guy's signature. My house here, he couldn't sign. He couldn't sign. He put an X. That's the signature. X marks the spot. You tear out, you scratch out the signature. Chalak, right? You scratch out unclean, on a plain piece of paper that you write. By the way, somebody asked early on in getting the deaf man cloth. I don't think so, because Gemara talks about niyar all the time. Rashi here says niyar, or this could have been by other kinds of stars, but here we're talking about a get also, and Rashi constantly refers to niyar. Anyway, you scratch out for them a signature, and they fill it in with ink. In other words, they don't know. They scratch out a signature for them on the paper, and he fills it in with ink. Parshim say that he didn't fill in the whole thing with ink, because if you fill in the whole thing, it's not a signature. It's not a signature. And how can you confirm that? Confirm a signature, everybody has a unique signature. This wasn't his signature. This was the guy who scratched it out for him. So it's not really, unless he didn't fill it all in. So the part that he filled in, so that's his signature, that he filled in only part of it. That's another discussion. Anyway, you scratch out on clean, on a straight, on a clean, fresh piece of paper. Okay. Because of Iguna, we're Mako, right? Because if you can't sign on, maybe the husband wants to leave overseas, or maybe he's in a bad state and he doesn't want to fall Yibam. So because of Iguna, they're more Mako. We don't say if they know how to read and to sign. So you only do that special heter by gitin, not by anything else. That's what Shmuel says. So we're excluding that. Rav Meir says in 4 cases are shichrei avodim similar to Gitei Yishim. We said what the 4 are. Molochu Mevi, that's Fani Nechtav, the Kuti, the Arkos or Goyim, that you get can't be signed on by Goyim and a Goyish court. That doesn't work. And according to Meir, there's 4 things that you can be choser on both, but it doesn't work. They're not the same. Gitei Nashim not the same when it comes to Adam who don't know how to sign. But Gitei Nashim we have that kula, not by shichrei avodim. So it's more kriyaman the kashma. Who said anything about reading? You talk about if they don't know how to sign. If they don't know how to sign, you can scratch out for them and fill it in. Who said other stories? If they know how to read, there's something's missing from the Bryce. If Adam don't know how to read, they can write, but they can't read. Maybe they know how to sign their own signature, but they can't read. Call them lefneim, so you can read it for them. Because when they can sign underneath it, as you read it for them, maybe they're blind, whatever, and they could sign. They don't know how to sign. You could tear it up, but that's only by Gittin Hashem, not by other ones. So that's what the mayor is excluding. Gemara Basulek. Now the Gemara is going to say, what do you mean? Are there no other similarities between Get Isha and Shichur Eved? Basulek, Ba'ika, Homer Tim gets Alishti. The man says, give this get to my wife. Ishtar Shichur Zela Abdi, Umes, and then he died. Lo Yitna Lachamisa. You can't give it for me. So why? Because ain't get Lachamisa. So if he says, give a get to his wife, right? It's not a schus for her. And the shliach did not get there before the guy died. The husband died. Well, if he died, she's free on a There's no get. You can't give a get after death. So what about shachar zela avdi? Also the nachlamisa. Now, so he said. Rashi says over here, even according to Rabbanan who say that you're mazakit for them, but you still have to get has to reach his hand. Rashi says, "Afilu Rabbanan dami shachar Rabbanan right smack in the middle of the page." Then he can't go back on it. He's not Meshucher. Tosas takes issue with this, and Tosas says, what are you talking about? Tosas, the very master low, says, the Dover Tema in the middle of the Tosas there. Dover Tema, Pirusha. Strange what Rashi is saying. Even the Schusu, Pshita the Zochel altar. If it's a schus for him, why can't you go back on it when he gives a get shecher for an Eved? Because it's a schus for him. So that means that the Shliach is mazakid, acquires it for him right away. So he should be free even before the guy died. So Tosafos disagrees with Rashi. Other Mefarshim say that maybe over here it's different because he said tnu. Again, Homer tnu gets alishti. He means say give it to him, meaning I don't want him to be freed until you give it to him. Some say that's just why he could go even according to Rabbanan. But Tosafos says, and therefore the Rabbanan could, therefore the Rabbanan say over here it says tu get alishti v'shtachas umeis lo'itna lachamisa, because it meant according to a mayor, it's not a schus for them. So according to Meir, you could say this is going according to Meir, it's not a schus for them. So therefore they're not divorced until it reaches their hands. And by the time it reached their hands, the husband had died or the Adam had died. But according to Rabbanan, that it's a schus for them, it should work right away, unless you say it's because of Tanu. In any case, that's a discussion among the Rishonim. Pardon? Yeah. So it would be a schus for her. It's not right. It would be a schus for her, possibly. but still, and therefore he could be mazaket for it right away. You don't say that. You don't say that because we get Isha Stam, we assume that she'd rather not be divorced, right? Because she can't marry Cohen afterwards, etc. So he might have wanted to do that, where we do a kula with a signature and stuff like that. But to say that that she automatically assigned this guy, we assume that she assigned him to be a shliach lekabbalah, right? That's what we mean. There's a schus for her. We don't say that because like you say, it's not always a schus. She can't marry a Cohen. She'd rather not be a grusha. All right. So umeis lo yitla chamisa, but trumana leploni umeis yitla chamisa. If a guy that said give this money to Yankel, it's considered, you can give it right away. Why? Because the rabbi said, so that a person shouldn't get confused and he's on his deathbed and be upset and cause his death process, maybe hasten his death. The rabbi said that Divrei Shemra says something, it's as if it's done. And therefore, when he said, give this money to Yankel, whoever he gave it to, the shlich was mazaket for Yankel right away. Okay, that's by money. But through gets lo shouldn't give it after death. Again, according to Meir for sure, and possibly even according to Meir for sure. Maybe it could be even according to Rabbanim. The point though is that here's another similarity between get ish and shecher evet. That if you say you send the shliach and you say give it to my evet, give it to my wife, this get, and the guy dies, you can't give it after misa. So the answer is milsa. So why can't you say that as another similarity? According to the Rabbanim, it would be 4 similarities. According to Meir, it would be 5. Milsa the isa b'shtaros lokani. The answer is we're only talking about things that are unique to these kind of stars. But I read this milsa isa b'shtaros lokani because that applies to other stars also. The Shalch Rabin b'shmei Ravu. Rabin sent from Eretz Yisrael named Ravu. Havayodin should know. Shalch Rabelaz l'go. Rabelaz sent the following halacha to the Golos. Mishum Rabbeinu, name of Rabbeinu. Presumably that would be Rebbe. Shchiv Mira. Sha'amar kisvu v'shtim mana leploni umeis. Shchiv Mira says, give this money. He says, write this and give this money to Ploni, umeis ein kosmenosin. If he died, you don't write it. Because he said, write this. He said, write a star, right? A star. He says, give this money to Ploni, right? Shamar kisvu v'shtim Ploni. Ein kosmenosin. Maybe you only want to do the star. Ein star lachamisa. So this rule that you're saying applies to get isha and shecher evet, that if he sent it and the guy died before the get reached their hands, that you can't give el chamisa, is not unique to get shecher and get isha. It applies even by other stars also. If a guy says, write him a star matana, give him some money or give him a house or give him some car, real estate, whatever it is, said write it, then you can't give el chamisa. You can't do that because once he's dead, dead is dead. Once you're dead, you don't own anything anymore. But as soon as a person dies, it goes to Yerusha to whoever it goes to. He doesn't own anybody, so you can't give something after death. Get out tonight, correct? Yeah. That if they don't come back by a certain time, it should be a get from now, while they were alive, not a get after death. They give it. Not only they give it while they're alive, they say it should be chal while they're alive, retroactive before they die. After they die, you can't give a get. You can't do anything after death. It's retroactive, so it was before. They're saying it should be chal right now. Let's say it should be chal. He's giving it today. He goes to the war. Tomorrow he dies. It's chal from today. That's what he's doing. You can't do any transaction. You can't give a get after death. You can't give money after death. You can't do anything after death. Death is final. So you can. So this thing applies to other things. We're talking about things that only apply to get ish and shecher evet. So Gemara says maybe there's another similar. They both have to be lishma, right? We learned that it says law by both. According to Rabbah, that's why you say so that to make sure to ascertain that they're written lishma. So according to Rabbah, that says the reason for vanach is lishma. Fine. So that's you already mentioned maybe that which is fanach. So you've mentioned it already in the Mishnah or in the Brisa, and the Mishnah and the Brisa, that one. Rava Kasha, Rava, who says the reason Fanach Menachim is because Adim Soman Kaimo, what about that similarity? Vasu, and I'll tell you another similarity. Bein l'Rava, Ha'ika Mechuber. The rule is that you cannot write a get on a tree stump, let's say, write it on a tree, and then saw it off and give it to her, because that's because of an asan. Mishal Chasar Ella Kasara, you write it and give it. If you have to write it and do some other pu'ula in between, you have to cut it off from the ground, that's no good. And that applies to Shichur Evet also. Why? Because Gomer Law, Rashi says, if you have to cut it off first, Gomer Law, we learn out Zera Shava. What applies to get Ish, applies to Shichur Evet also, because it says law by both Shichur Evet and by Begat Isha. So according to both of them, what about Mechuber? Why don't you say that's another similarity, that if it's written on a something attached to the ground and then you cut it off, you can't give a get that way. So the Gemara says, so the Gemara gives another answer. The Gemara says, first the Gemara wanted to say it only includes things that only apply to Get Ish and Shichur Evet, not other stars. Then what about this thing? What about Mechuber, which only applies to Get Ish and Shichur Evet? Why not mention there's another similarity? No, Kitani Psul Rabbanon. We're only talking about things that are possible at Rabbanon, right? And Mechuber is a Psul Deraisa, it's because of Nasan, right? The Shema is also the Araisa, right? So that's we're only talking about Psul Rabbanon, like. What's the Psul Rabbanan? Saying you have to say B'fanei, right? This that a kuti is okay. That's a Rabbanan. The rabbi said that because since, as we said, since both Adam have to sign together, the Jew won't sign unless he knows that the kuti is a kosher aid. Okay, talking about Psul Rabbanan. Also, our cost. So the Gemara says, "Ikem Psul Rabbanan." The Raisa Lokani. We're not talking about things that are the Raisa and Mechuber and the Lishmar are the Raisas. But our calls should have to come. What do you mean? What about our cost? If you say if a get was written in a Goyisha court, signed by Goyisha Adam in front of Goyisha judges, right? That's a Psul Daraisa. That's what we say at the top of the page. What's the third similarity? That Shtaros Ha'olim Bar Kol Shel V'Chav are okay for money matters, but not good to Nashim Shechrei Bottom. That's the Raisa, because they're not in the parsha of because of an Asan. Misha Yeshna B'chal Nesin, Yeshna B'chal Ksiva. That's the Raisa, that a goy can't be a witness on a Jewish get. Isn't that a Daraisa? And that's a similarity. How can you say when only the 3 or 4 similarities are only Drabanans? That's a Daraisa. So the Raisa Uktani. The answer is Bedi Masir Rabbalazar. You know, we're speaking about Rabbalazar Hossein Masir Karti. What does that mean? That what cuts off the marriage? Giving the get in front of 2 witnesses, right? You have to give it in front of 2 witnesses, just like the Kedushin. Adam don't have to be signed on there at all. So according to Rabbi Lazar, even if it was in a Goyisha court and it was signed by Goyisha, and what do we care if the Goyisha Adam are on there? We don't go by the Adam who are signed on, we go by the Adam that was given over in front of the Adam Asirim, which are Jews. So according to Rabbi Lazar, they're made a Masir Karti, and therefore what? So why is it no good over here? If Adam Masir Karti, why does we say that it's no good? A getter or a shichur ever done in a Goyisha court is no good. Oh, that's a Drabanan. Why? Because even though, remember we had this before, Rabbi Lezer holds that you don't need Adam on a get. You don't need Adam signed on a get at all, as long as it's given in front of Adam. However, in Midrabanan, it's a good idea to put Adam on there in case he can't find the Adam Masir, it's on there. However, Rabbi Lezer's motive, if it's Mizuyif Mitocho, if it's bad Adam is worse than no Adam, right? A bad aid, like a relative, let's say a relative is signed on it. He had his brother signed on his get. A brother can't be an aid. That's Mizuyif Mitocho, that's no good. Midrabanan, that's what we mean over here too. Over here, it's speaking about when goyim are written on the shtar, goyim are written on the get. That's no good with Rabban. If there would be no Adam on it, according to Lezer, you would be okay, even a goyish court. But if there's goyim written on it, it's no good because you might come to accept that these are kosher witnesses and say you can accept goyim as witnesses. So therefore, it's also Nishid Rabbanan. How can you say that our mission is going to Lezer when it says the third thing is that does Adam Masir Karti, and therefore the psul in Goyish, of course, is only Rabbanan. Why? Because it's Mizuyif B'tocho. According to Lezer's motive, Mizuyif B'tocho is no good because you got Goyish Adam signed on it. But Meditani Sefer, the Sefer is Rav Shimon Omer Ap Elu Cherim. The mission is going to say that we're going to have tomorrow's daf. Is going to say that this case of our calls is on tomorrow's mission. Rav Shimon says. Even this is also kosher. From Rav say says even if you Goyish court, it's also okay with Goyish Adam on. From Rav Zera, Rav Shimon l'shitas Rav Lezer. Rav Shimon went according to Rav Lezer. Don't made him a sirkarti. Therefore, he says it's okay. You know why? Because even in the Goyish court, we go with the Adam Masir right? Michlal the Tanakam Savlo. Smash with the Tanakam doesn't hold Adam Masir Karti. Eda Chasima Karti. If Eda Chasima Karti and these are Goyim can't be Goyim are not in the parsha of Gittin and Kedushin, therefore they can't be signatures, and that's a Psul Daraisa. The answer is no. Both of them hold it. We're going to Rav Lezer. Both the Tanakama and Rav Shimon. It can be Nayu Shemus Mupokin. If it's clear, the guy's name is Tyler. The guy's name is Nolan. Jews don't give names like Tyler and Nolan, right? They don't have names like that. So therefore, Paul is questionable, right? Thinking of Cardinal baseball players, but when we're talking about these kind of signatures, if they're Shemus M'Bakim, what do you mean by that? So take a look at the top Rashi. Tanakama also B'shit says Rav Lezer Kohen, and therefore it's only Nisad Rabbanan because Midaraisa it's good. You go by the Edom Asirah and Rabbanan who Pasek. Still most of the message because maybe you'll rely on these Edom who are signed on who are Goyim. Or the most of them give it in front of them. You'll give it in front of you say, oh, these are signed on a get. They're good. If their names are Tyler, Boone, Clyde, Christopher, names that are real Goyish names. Jews don't use those names, right? That's not Mezuyik Mitocho. What do we say? Rav Lezer holds you don't need Edom signed on to get it all, right? Edom Asir Karti. However, if you've got bad Edom signed on, like a brother, a relative, or a goy, that's how it's Rav Lezer says over here. That's Rav Lezer says over here, yeah. But so that it's also Rabbanan because you might come to accept. Rav Shimon says even further. He says if it's clear that it's a goyish name, that's not Mezuyik Mitoch. Mezuyik Mitoch means if it's clear that it's a bad name, that it's forged because we come to rely on that. Fine. Shimon says no. Those names not Mezuyik Mitoch. The mother of Lezer, the Kuli Alma, Yadid of the Kavmein for if their names are Tyler and Clyde and names like that are goyish names, Christopher, the great names. People will know they're not going to rely on that. They know that it's a goyish name. You don't rely on that, and then it's only because they had a Messiah. And therefore, Rav Shimon says it's okay. The Tanakh will still say no. That's Mezuyik Mitocho. It's a bad signature. It's like a brother. It's like a relative. Also, a signature of a goy would be no good. Rav Shimon says no. If it's a signature of a goy, everybody knows that's no good, and therefore, even according to Blezer, it would be okay. And therefore, he says that if in a goyish court with goyish Edom signed on it, it's okay according to Blezer, it's kosher because you go by the Edom Masira. Therefore, these are all Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, "B'chazar d'Oraisa." So we're trying to say that what are the three or four cases where Gitin Nashim are similar to Shechar Badim, or where cases which only Rabbanan. D'Oraisas we're not talking about. Mechuber l'karka is D'Oraisa, right? Shema is D'Oraisa. What about Chazara? Rav Meir said that Chazara's the fourth one was Rav Meir. Rav Meir said that if you go back on the deal on the get before she received it, it's the deal's off, right? Because it's not a schus for them. So that's a D'Oraisa. Uktani. So there's a similarity between the two. And that's D'Oraisa. It's not a get anymore. If he didn't give a get, if he changed his mind, you're no longer the shliach, and that's a D'Oraisa. El Kiktani, so it goes off from there too. The difference is not D'Oraisas or whether they are, what were the other things we said, Psul D'Rabbanan versus Psul D'Oraisa, or whether they're just similarities with these cases, with these similarities versus other shtaros. No. Ella Kiktani Milsa Deles B'Kedushin. We're only talking about things that don't apply to Kedushin. Don't like Kedushin. Milsa Dis B'Kedushin Lo Tani. He didn't touch the things that apply to Kedushin. And therefore, and things that don't apply to Kedushin. In other words, these isurim these differences that we're talking about are things that don't apply to Kedushin. We didn't mention Lishma because that applies by Kedushin. We didn't mention these things that apply to Kedushin. If it's mentioned, we're talking things that don't apply to Kedushin. If it applies by Kedushin, then we don't mention it. I have a Chazar Gufa is Kedushin. Chazar applies by Kedushin, right? If a man, you said before, Avram, if a man sends a ring with a shliach and he says, Mekadosh Isha for me, and he changed his mind in the middle, and he said, no, I renege on the shliach, so he went in front of Adam, in front of a court, and said, he's not my shliach anymore, so it applies there too. So how do you say, we only mentioned the three or four things that don't apply by Kedushin and do apply by Gitin Nashim and Shifrei Avadim. The Chazar applies by Kedushin, it's a B'shlichus Bal Karcha. The difference is a shlichus where it's a force of karcha. The begerish and isha kedushin lesa. You can't force her to get married. If she says I don't want to accept it, you can't do it. By get isha midaraisa, you could divorce it. So by a shlichus d'oraisa, that only applies by gerishin, whether it's Gitin Nashim Shifrei Avadim and not by kedushin. So those are the three or four that we're talking about, are things that only apply to Gitin and kedushin. For example, by a woman by getting married. We don't say that it doesn't apply. These rules don't apply. Getting married, these similarities don't mean. And Rashi points out because by the kedushin, since B'Oraisa Mekdeshim Shem Edom Masira, Yom Mekdesh Shari Yishus Lahama. In other words, what do you want to say that by Gitin Nosh, if he goes out in the Goyish courts, we said that's no good, right? By Gitin Nosh it doesn't apply, but by kedushin it would apply because you go by Edom Masira. If he gives it to her in front of gives her marriage a ring in front of two witnesses, it's a good marriage. What are you going to say? Because it was written up in a Goyish court, that's no good? No, she's married. You can't just free her based on that. By gitin, you could say it's not a good enough get, and you should do another get, right? But by kedushin, you're not going to be mishacher her if she's really married. Therefore, these things don't. We're talking about 3 or 4 things that don't apply to kedushin, do apply to gitin nashim and shachur abad. Tomorrow's daf and Shabbos' daf will be on the podcast. Actually, the tomorrow's daf we start already from the top of the page, not just from the Mishnah. We're up to the Mishnah now. And on Sunday, Mr. Shem will start on Daf Yud Beis from the 2 dots near the top of the page. The 2 dots near the top of the page. Chag Sameach v'Shabbat Shalom.
Tomorrow night we're making